Hi everybody, it's Chris Kandai here. Welcome to another edition of FAQ, Faith and Quarantine. Each weekday we look at a different part of the Bible to see how it can help us live well for God in this cultural moment. And boy, everything is happening. This weekend I've been speaking a lot about race and the Christian faith. There's a special video about that on the YouTube channel. Have a look at that. 5 ways you can fight racism. But we're still in the middle of lockdown and all this is going on. And with everything that's changing around our world, you can feel increasingly powerless. What can I do? I'm locked in a house, I'm with my family, or I'm on my own. What can I possibly do to influence world events? And I want to draw your attention to a really powerful passage of scripture. If you've been following the FAQ journey with us, you've been seeing we've been working chronologically through the Bible, and the last series we looked at Daniel, and he starts off with a person with very little power and ends up being incredibly influential, and we learned from him about courage under fire. I want to pick up another story a little bit later in the journey of Israel. They're still in exile and they are under a lot of pressure. There's a new king and he's doing all sorts of crazy things, and in the middle of it is one person, and her story changes everything about her nation's future. And she was locked down and locked in like many of us in many different ways, and from her I think we can figure out another way, another role model, another perspective on living for God in difficult times. Maybe you've guessed which story it is. I'm going to look at the story of Esther, and it begins in the most poetic, beautiful way that you can imagine. All sorts of things kicking off. Listen into the drama and let's make some connections with our moment in history. Esther chapter 1. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. Here we are. We've been told about the scale of the empire that Xerxes rules over. And he's after King Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar and Darius, and now comes Xerxes, and his kingdom is huge, India to Kush. It reminds me, they used to say about the British Empire, the sun never sets on the British Empire. It's so enormous that it spans the world. Well, this was the equivalent in the ancient world. At the time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media. The princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom. 180 days, that's like 6 months. He spent that time parading. Now, maybe you've seen what happens in China when they parade their military might. They get their cruise missiles and all the troops marching in front of them. Britain does the same. We have our kind of military parades. America's the same, but very few nations would possibly put on a 6-month-long festival or parade. But that's Xerxes. He's doing things over the top. Look how great and powerful I am. And often, as is the case, people that drive flash cars, actually they seem to be overcompensating for something. Well, that is what this ruler is overcompensating for, as we're going to see. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen fastened with cords, and white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold. Each one was different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. Wow, they are drinking from gold goblets. In fact, everyone in the kingdom is given a gold goblet that's different. This guy is going over the top, so having 7 days of feasting after 6 months of parading. This is crazy scale. I read a book about the start of Uber, and when Uber kind of went big, they took all their employees away to Vegas for a weekend. This is nothing compared to what happened in the book of Esther. This king is going over the top in every way he can. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way. For the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wishes. Unlimited free bar. This is the kind of king that most people would celebrate. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. Okay, we have some gender divide here. We're signalling again the way that women are going to be treated in this culture. The king has his massive one and the queen has another one for her friends and particularly for women. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from the wine, in other words, plastered after 7 days of unlimited drinking, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehunim, Bizthar, Harbona, Bigthar, Abathar, Zethar and Carcass to bring before him Queen Vashti wearing her gold crown in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. So here we go, trophy wife. She gets brought in or ordered to come in with her crown by his 7 eunuchs who have been sent together because they've had this separate female banquet. And here's this mighty ruler who rules from India to Kush, telling everyone how great his wife is. Bring in the trophy wife. Well, not quite. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Okay, this mighty king who has 6 months of parading, 7 days of feasting, showing everyone how great and powerful he is, he's in trouble because his own household is in a difficult situation. And he doesn't have power to command his wife. You shouldn't have power to command your wife anyway. He'd overreached and now he is going to be a laughingstock in front of all of the citizens of Susa. And so he's angry and embarrassed. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of the law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. Again, he spoke to a whole bunch of men about how to handle his wife. This is not looking good. This is showing the stupidity of the kind of battle of the sexes. This is not a good way to fix things. This is not going to be great marital advice. It's men consulting with men. This is going to end badly. Anyway, here's what they said. Verse 15. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the commands of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, and not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. Okay, maybe that's a good thing. Ordering women around is not a great idea, but you can see these men want to protect their power, and so they have to do something. They have to put these women right, or so they think, and so they come up with a plan. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There'll be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the law of Persia and Media. Do you remember the law of the Medes and the Persians? That's what cooked Daniel's goose, or it seemed it did, when the king was manipulated into making sure that Daniel wouldn't be able to pray to his God, and he got thrown into the lion's den. Well, it's the same law of the Medes and the Persians that can never be undone, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Uh-oh, this is not a great way to solve a marital dispute. Ban the woman that you love from your own presence. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. Not quite sure this is going to work, but there you go. That was the plan. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, proclaiming to each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. We are being set up for a mighty turning of the tables. If you know the story of Esther, you know where this is going. But if you don't, well, come back tomorrow. We'll kind of unpack it little bit by little bit. But here's the setup. This is the opening scene. Here's what's going to happen. the king wants to show how mighty and powerful he is by ordering that the queen can't be in his presence. And so we're expecting this to have a ripple effect, that now men will be firmly in control and women will be subjugated. And so this is the setup for the story of Esther, but you might already have a clue. This is a Bible book named after a woman. The central character in this story is going to be a woman, despite the super powerful King Xerxes, whose empire runs from India to Kush. He is going to be undone. Things are going to get turned around by Esther, and we haven't even met Esther yet. Now, the Bible loves to do this. Do you remember when in the book of Exodus, you've got this mighty Pharaoh who's forgotten about Joseph, and he's so powerful. He's going to oppress the Jewish nation. Well, it's women that undo him. It's Shiphrah and Puah, two Hebrew women who are midwives that undo the king's plan to bring genocide against all of Israel and to wipe out all the young boys so that the Israelites don't overtake the Egyptians. Well, those two women, Shiphrah and Puah, and later Miriam and Jochebed, and even his own daughter, is going to turn things around. The Bible has this brilliant way of undoing patriarchy. People think the Bible promotes patriarchy and it's encouraging women to be oppressed. Actually, the Bible's far more revolutionary than that. It sets up these kings and powers that think they are so powerful because they're male, only to undo them. And that's what's going to happen in the book of Esther. Now, the book of Esther hasn't yet introduced God. It hasn't yet introduced the Jewish nation. All you're seeing is the power and might of King Xerxes. But the scene is being set because one of the nations that King Xerxes rules over from India to Kush is Israel. And Esther, as we're going to find out soon in the next chapter, is a young Israelite woman. So a woman, and as we've seen in this book so far, women don't seem to have a lot of positional power, and a vassal state, a state that's been overrun by the Medes and the Persians. A woman from that humble origin is going to undo the whole of this kingdom. God has a really amazing reputation of using the small, the insignificant, that which everyone has discarded, to blow up systems and to transform the world. Sometimes the Bible uses this picture of the mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds. And when it gets sown in the ground, grows and grows and grows and becomes a tree in which the birds can nest. God loves to use the unpredictable and the unrecognizable as his means to bring change. Maybe you feel like that. Maybe you feel like you're a nobody and a nothing. There's nothing you can do. Well, we're going to see from Esther that even when we feel powerless, God has the ability to turn things around and transform the world. So hold on there. This is a beautiful little setup. It's like the opening scene. I've been thinking about the TV show Little Fires Everywhere and the beginning scene of that program. Please go and watch it. It's got huge things to say about race and adoption and privilege and power and middle class dreams. But it starts off with